It's so fun to have so many of my friends who are my business besties speaking today. And so I have another business bestie who I met through Katarina's community. When you go on retreats, you get to learn you get to learn more about yourself, about your business, but that isn't even the best part. To me, the best part is the connections you will make with other heart-centered women. And many of the women here today have been on my retreats or scheduled to go on my retreats. Carolyn, my next speaker, is going on my retreat to Italy in June, and that's going to be super special. Okay, so before I do her formal bio, I like to always say personal things about the people that I host. And what I want to say about Carolyn, I had just had surgery in May, and she told me, "Oh, I'm coming to DC." And I'm like, I don't care what the doctor says about staying home. I'm going to go see her because she's my bestie. It is so important to me to go to meet up with her because she pours into me. She poured into the summits I've been hosting. She's poured in by being a sponsor. She's poured in by being a good friend. She's someone who has my back. And so I'm going to have her back. And wherever she is anywhere near me, I don't care if I just got a lung removed, I'm going to meet up with her. So Carolyn and I got to tour the African American History Museum in DC right after my surgery. And I was so happy to see her. And we get to hang out on Katarina's retreats and other people's retreats as well. Her bio. Carolyn Pistone is a committed earthling dedicated to saving the planet using her real estate license. What? Carolyn is the president and managing director at Clear Blue Commercial. She has held various senior positions in the entertainment, real estate, and high-tech industries. These experiences have inspired her to work to build a supportive, innovative, and collaborative environment for clients, team members, and yes, even the planet to thrive. We will have Carolyn's website, her book page. She's also working on another book that's going to be out soon. I'm going to have her podcast episode, and her gifts will be in the chat. Her talk today is called,
All right. Don't take any unless you get everything, okay?
I'm
All right.
sorry,
Yeah.
Cheryl, can you mute yourself, please, sweetie? Okay, and Carolyn's title today is Joy Rising, from Trauma to Triumph and Transformation. She will also inspire you. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I feel honored to have been witness to your very first sweet potato after surgery. And thank you, Katarina, for always being so focused and so inspiring. And you may have heard a reference to real estate in my introduction. And I have to tell you that trauma is not what I usually talk about, but I feel especially connected not only to Karen, but to the wisdom and the grace and the strength and the resilience and the brilliance that trauma has brought me and trauma survivors have brought me, that I just could not help but support these summits and start to talk out loud about them. As I like to say, early on in my life, I was certain that I was special and cherished, and I was going to make the world a better place. I was going to change the world, and I was going to spend the rest of my life making the world a better place. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who laughed and danced and sang and thought and saw that when she did that and shared her joy, that it brought joy to others. And when she grew up, she wanted to make that limitless. So she did. And we all lived happily ever after at the end. Actually, a whole lot of things happened in the middle that made her question that made her doubt that made her wonder if she was important or worthy of anything at all. The first 4 years of my life, I was the only child of my parents, who unfortunately had a terribly unhappy marriage, but they both loved me. And they introduced me to my extended family, my grandparents, my cousins, all these other things. And I had no doubt that I was loved, that I was special, that I was part of something great. Unfortunately, they separated when I was 3 years old, divorced when I was 4. And they both remarried. People who really wished I didn't exist. And suddenly my world changed, and I went from being the princess in the center of attention and knowing that everything I did was wonderful, to suddenly feeling that I was wrong and bad for some reason, or that I was a burden, or that I was shameful. And while he definitely wasn't my only abuser, my stepfather, who came into my life when I was 7, was a raging alcoholic narcissist bully. And my mother, who for her own reasons must have felt unworthy in her own life, twisted herself into a pretzel in order to please him, keep him, deserve him. And she demanded that I do the same. And of course, I wanted to please my mother, so I did that. Now, he was a rager. He abused me physically, psychologically, verbally, emotionally. And as I have shared before, when I became a very young teenager, he began to abuse me sexually as well. And there was one incident that I can share, or that I will share. I was an athlete. I was on a swim team in my freshman year in high school. And I went to a swim meet and discovered that I was not on the roster. So for me, since I was not a star on the team or anything, I was like, fine, I don't need to be here. So I called my boyfriend, who had a car and a driver's license, to come and get me. And he came and got me, and we went and got ice cream, and then he dropped me off at home. And when I got home, my whole family was there, including my stepfather, and they asked, how was the swim meet? And I told them the truth about what happened. And this really triggered my stepfather, who, number one, did not like the fact that I had a boyfriend, did not like the fact that it was possible I was having sex with my boyfriend. And he began to go into a rage and a rage and a bigger and bigger rage. So I went and I took a shower. And when I came back after the shower, because it was almost dinner time, he was not done. I was hoping he had cooled down, but instead he started to rage bigger and bigger and said some horrifically profane things to me that I will not repeat because I don't want to trigger anybody else. But I'm sure it's worse than you're imagining. And I was cowering on the couch in my bathrobe. And he was a very big man, a much bigger man than my father. He was 6'2", well over 200 pounds. And I can see the veins on his neck are popping out. And he's yelling down, he's standing over me and he's yelling down at me. And then all of a sudden I see him pull back his fist and he is going to punch me in the face. And so I ducked to get out of the way. And he connected with my shoulder. Then he got really when he didn't connect in the way that he did, he came back again and he went to choke me. And I squirmed, I swirled out of the way. I remember I was crawling across the couch to get away from him. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he got his finger, weirdly his wedding finger, stuck in the folds of my bathrobe and it broke. So all of a sudden I get to the other side of the couch and he leaves and he walks out of the room, goes out into the garage and comes back with a hacksaw. At which point I ran as fast as I could. I ran as fast as I could into my room. Luckily I had a room, and locked the door. My mother, in the meantime, while all this was going on, had been crying in the kitchen, holding my little sister, who was about 5. And she grabs my little sister, goes running into my little sister's room with her and locks the door there. The reason I didn't know, the reason he went and got the hacksaw is because his wedding ring finger had swelled up so bad and he was worried he was going to lose the finger, and he had his wedding ring on it, so he thought he could cut the wedding ring off with a hacksaw. That did not happen. He ended up calling the fire department and blah, 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 blah. In the meantime, I'm hiding and crying in my room and all of this is going on. An hour or two later, my mother comes and brings me dinner in my room. And I told her, no, I wasn't hungry. And then I looked her dead in the eye and I said, why isn't he having dinner in his room? Why is it me? And she had no answer to that. Now, I ended up quitting the swim team the next day because I didn't want to take off my clothes because my whole shoulder was completely purple. I also broke up with my boyfriend for the same reason. And I wasn't going to tell this part of the story, but about a week, and I basically stayed in my room for a week. I'd wait till he left and I would go to school. And then before he came back, I'd go lock myself in my room and I just hid. And my mother started coming up to me saying, your dad was crying last night and he feels so, you really should talk to him. And so one night he knocks on my bedroom door. And he comes in and he said, I hear you've injured your shoulder. Let me see it. I wasn't about to let him see it. So I said, it's fine. No, it's fine. And he said, the reason we have such struggle between us is because of our intense sexual attraction for each other. Now, I was strong enough to know at that point that it was not mutual, but I didn't say anything. I realized that what I had to do was get the heck out of there as quickly as I could. And I did fantasize and make some plans about how I was going to run away. But it occurred to me that my best bet was going away to college. So I made sure I went away to college in another state. And once I got away to college, I started looking back going, maybe I wasn't treated so good. So when I came back after my first break, I confronted my mother and I let her know that this was not fair to me and this was not right. And my family responded by being estranged from me for the next 8 years. And they told themselves and everybody else in our family that we grew up with that Carolyn doesn't like us anymore and she's just really messed up and she's bad and oh, poor us. A couple of years later, I got married to my first husband. And I remember looking at him across a crowded room and thinking, I am just what this guy needs. And I like to say, I didn't marry a man. I married a project. Because I was really looking, first and foremost, to be loved and to belong. And I felt that the only way to be loved and to belong was to make somebody need me. And I planned my own wedding and paid for my own wedding. I did invite my family and my extended family, and they did show up. They behaved abominably. They did not speak to me at my own wedding. And I remember standing on a stage with my brand new husband and thinking, okay, if we're going to be estranged, if I'm going to be estranged from my family, I am going to make sure it's their loss. I am going to go out and I am going to be an amazing person and have an amazing, wonderful life, and they're not going to be any part of it. And that kind of happened. And maybe I've had all the positive impact that I wanted to have out of spite. Or maybe it was because I really wanted to prove that I did not deserve the labels that were being put on me. I did not deserve the treatment that was made of me. And let me say, I hope I have not been particularly triggering to any of you here today that have also been traumatized, because that is not my intent at all. And I know that there are people in the world, people in my own family, people among our friend group that have been traumatized and are continually re-triggered and re-traumatized. That is not my intent at all. What I have discovered in my brilliant career, and as I always say, if you lose enough jobs, you get a great resume, and mine is particularly impressive, is that hypervigilance, born of trauma, can be a superpower. It can help you figure out a lot of things. It can help you figure out what other people's motivations are. And it can figure out how to bypass certain consequences of other people's bad behavior. It helped me rise very far, very fast and hit every glass ceiling there was. An interesting thing happened at the end of my step-parents' lives. Tammy, you can absolutely have more than one superpower, and I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do, as do I. I did let my parents and step-parents back into my life much later. And I like to think that I let them back into my life on my own terms, because I didn't need anything from them. I didn't want anything from them. And as Katerina so beautifully said, I got to decide who was in my life. And my mother died. She went through a long process of dying, and I helped to care for her in her dying days. And I think that was somewhat healing for both of us, although she was still in denial to the day she died. I remember her saying to me a couple of days before she died, Carolyn, I always tried to put you first, and I always tried to do what was best for you. And I said, I appreciate that, Mom, but that does not jive with what my experience was. And she put her head down. One of the things that happened, she went into hospice, and they took out her feeding tube and her oxygen and sent her home. And she languished for days longer than she should have. And it was really very concerning to all of us, because we knew, even though she could not speak or respond, we knew she was starving to death, which is a horrible way. And I would go and sit with her and hold her hand. And then finally, on the last day of her life, I leaned over and I whispered in her ear, if you need to go, Mom, it's okay. I'll take care of Dad. And she said, see ya. And she died a couple hours later. Now, I knew that's what she was waiting for, but I didn't really think it was going to happen because she married a younger man. He was a big, strapping, handsome dude. And he was a catch. And I figured some young woman would come along and he would be her problem and that would be that. Unfortunately, 2 years later, he got diagnosed with glioblastoma, brain cancer, and I ended up taking care of him. Now, I have indicated that he was a hateful, angry, rageful son of a bee. And I can tell you that brain cancer did not improve that situation. There were some funny times, however. He was a very big man, and I am not, none of you have seen me, but I'm not very big. I'm 5'4", actually a little under. It says 5'4" on my driver's license. I'm 5'4". I don't weigh much. I'm not that big a person. He's 6'2". He's a big man who's losing his ability to manage himself, to wash himself, to toilet himself, to feed himself. And getting him to and from his treatments, getting him in and out of the house, in and out of the car, getting him washed, getting him all his different tests, cleaning the filthy freaking house was absolutely, absolutely exhausting, mind-blowing, and he was still a tyrant. And I remember saying to my therapist, who I was smart enough to have a therapist at this time, oh my God, I am sleeping in my mother's bed and I am wearing my mother's pajamas and I am wiping her husband's ass. I am going to be in therapy for the rest of my freaking life, which has turned out to be true. And one of the favorite things that we like to say in our family now, all the time, there was one particularly trying day where I had to get my dad to radiation. I had to get him to the foot doctor to cut his toenails because there was no way I was going to cut his toenails. I had to get to the grocery store and find a way to bring him in with me so that we could have food in the house and then get him home. Oh, and then we had to stop because he had to have his caramel latte. Get him his caramel latte, then get him out of the car, get him home, blah, blah, blah. So we get home just in time for me to do the 5th load of laundry I was doing that day. And he just sits down in his special chair that we bought for him. And he says to me, "What's for dinner?" And I turned around and I said, "That's what's for dinner." And so now anybody asks too much of anybody in my family, the answer is, that's what's for dinner. What I really got from that time, however, was closure. I got the ability to give to number one, keep my promise to my mother, but also be able to show compassion to someone who had not shown compassion to me. And I knew he was terrified, and I knew he was not ready to die. And I remember a particular evening, I was getting ready to go to bed. I had already put him to bed, and I found him sitting up on his bed, just sobbing. And I didn't say anything. I just sat down next to him, and I put my arm around him, and I let him cry. And after about 5 minutes, the crying subsided. And he said, "Thank you." And then he went to sleep, and I went into the other room and went to bed. One of the reasons that I got closure from that is that I don't owe anybody anything anymore. I learned that I'm going to live by my values. I'm going to make the contribution I want to make in the world, regardless of what somebody else does. There's plenty of things to be triggered by. There are plenty of things to feel victimized by. There are plenty of things to feel awful about. I want to have positive impact in the world. I am a bold, brilliant, beautiful creation of a God that loves me. And so is everybody else. And so is everything else. And I want to find ways to make my positive, joyful impact limitless. And I want to find ways to make everybody else's limitless as well. Because I really feel that's the thing that makes us human. Not all of the triggers and traumas that the world and each other subject us to. For me, purpose equals positive impact. One of the things that I'm really working towards with the help of Katerina and Karen and some of the other wonderful people on this call and outside of this call is I am working to spread positive impact throughout the world and help other people do the same thing by quantifying your positive impact, by amplifying your positive impact, and then celebrating your positive impact. I think Katerina can take credit for any positive thing that Karen and I do together, including me being on this right now, because of the positive impact that she is putting into the world. Karen can take credit for all of the positive impact that we all are going to bring to the world because of her tender ministrations of all of us in her mission for all of us to heal, thrive, and dream. I want all of you to start to give yourselves credit for the amazing positive impact that you have in the world. Too many of us, when somebody says thank you to us, which is rare and precious, I know, but if somebody says thank you to us, often our response is, oh, it was nothing. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. The impact that you have in the world ripples out to others that you don't even know. I cannot tell you, since I have been speaking, how many times I have run into somebody at some event that I have never met before, who says, oh, I saw you speak, and here's what I'm doing for the planet because of it. Or I saw you speak, and here's what it meant to me. My last speech that I gave at Katerina's, I was really surprised that I talked about having adopted my foster children and the challenge and impact that brought. And another amazing woman who does amazing things for the world came up to me afterwards and said, I never tell anybody this in these things, but I was in 20 different foster homes, and to me, you're my hero. I was just trying to give a speech. And it had impact. So my hope is that all of you can embrace the impact that you do have, because it is huge. And we don't realize, I decided I wanted to do this thing around sustainability in my business. So I did a turf conversion. And for those of you that don't know, it's where you take the lawn, it's where you take out the lawn and the sprinklers and you replace it with a drip system and drought tolerant plants. It does a lot of good things for the ecosystem, but one of the biggest things it does is it saves water. And anybody who has sprinklers should put in a drip system. Number one, because the water that you're taking water from the aquifer, and then it runs down into the storm drains and out into the oceans, and it does not replenish the local water supply. What I didn't realize when I did that, I just started doing it because there was a drought and it was a good thing to do. Over the course of the year, we did enough turf conversions to save 3 million gallons of water a year. Yay me, yay. But what I have come to see is I did those projects 11 years ago. They were in 2015, but they're still saving 3 million gallons of water a year, which means that number goes up and up. And now I get to say I've saved 33 million gallons of water so far and counting. Same with anything else I've done for the planet. I can tell you now, because of what we've done in our business, we're diverting 3.5 million pounds of carbon from our atmosphere. And that number grows every year because we did one thing at one time that continues to divert those, that continues to save that. So everything, and I'm not saying that to brag, although I'm bragging a little bit. I am saying that because what we need to understand is that the positive impact that we do lasts long after we have done that. I don't know about you guys, but I am going to die someday. But when I die, those projects will still be saving 3 million gallons of water a year. The people that I have helped, my foster children that I adopted, will still be living lives that impact other people in a positive way. All of the good that we're doing in the world can become limitless, but we need as individuals to quantify, amplify, and celebrate those impacts, not just because we want to brag, but because it inspires others to do the same.
How to make your rusty cast iron skillet look like.
Karen, I am ready if anybody has any questions or wants to share or wants to point fingers or throw fruit.
I just want to say why people put their questions together. I think Sylvia has one. I've heard you speak several times now, and each time you speak, it's even more inspirational. I'm not even sure how that's working, but I thought after your last talk you did on the summit, where you showed us a picture of you being in a hospital bed, it was a very vulnerable photo, and that whole story, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so powerful. And then, of course, today, being vulnerable and sharing more about your stepfather, who many in this room I know can relate to being treated horrifically by a step parent or even a parent. That frees them up to be able to tell their story too. Maybe not today, but perhaps tomorrow. So I really don't think you even know how inspiring you are, my dear. I am so blessed to have you as a friend, truly. Sylvia, your question.
Carolyn, let me just tell you that you've given me a voice that now feels stronger, and I feel even more positive. Even the summit has changed me, but the fact that you've survived violence just like I have. I've survived gender-based violence since the age of 6. I've had many episodes of patterned violence in my life where I've lowered my standards and my boundaries, lowered up my own expectations of myself, thinking that I wasn't worthy, and I accepted the status quo. I'm realizing now that I've hit rock bottom and that I had to flee a situation and was homeless for a while, and now I'm homed. I'm running events in my community talking about gender-based violence and how important it is for all women not just of any one religion or color or race or creed, but women really need to hold each other's hands and say, this is unacceptable. And we do need to quantify our soft labor costs of giving birth to children and to providing economies. Like, we give birth to children, we adopt children, we are part of the economy. As a 56-year-old woman, being here in front of all of you, feeling a little vulnerable today, I just want to thank you for being so open and honest and inspirational, Carolyn, that you just spoke to my heart and soul. And I feel like now it's okay to have a purpose. And maybe accounting is in the past and it doesn't work for me for my fragmented mind, but now dealing with this very important issue, now being so relevant and less shaming, I'm proud to stand by you and be beside you right here. And I thank you for everything. Really, like, this was an incredible inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, especially for your vulnerability. Because what I have found is that the more, and I know that I said hypervigilance is a superpower, but I think vulnerability is a superpower too, because I have had so much more impact through my vulnerability. And I know with what you just said just now, everybody else on this call or anybody who watches the recordings, you're going to touch some people. And the work you're doing now to help others that have felt what you felt and experienced what you've experienced, your vulnerability in sharing that, but also your example in surviving and thriving and continuing to do good work because of that, is going to affect more people than you'll ever know.
I praise.
Yay, you.
I really praise so. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ah, yay, Tammy, thank you. You've gained 2 superpowers today.
Sylvia, that was a beautiful comment, question. I think it was more comments, but super beautiful. I don't know, Carolyn, if there's another question by anybody else, but I have one I'm gonna ask for the group.
Yes, ma'am.
Some of us have a really hard time wrapping our head around how you found the strength, the compassion to take care of that man when most of us would want to take him out. So my question is, how did you find the grace for him? How did you dig into that compassion? Because I think some of us are really befuddled by that. So I'd love to hear your response on that.
I'd like to say it's because I'm so evolved. I think it was really through my young training that this is what the dutiful daughter does. And it is because I promised my mother. But through the course of that, through the course of doing that, it allowed me to have my own boundaries. And I know it doesn't seem like I'm having my own boundaries when I'm wiping my abuser's ass, but, and forgive me for anyone who's offended by that. For me, it was also the thing that enabled me to say, F you, that's what's for dinner. And there was a conversation during that time where he started complaining to me about how nobody was taking care of him and nobody gave a shit about him and blah, 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 blah. And I was able to say to him out loud, look, maybe if you hadn't been such a son of a bitch your whole life, there would be other people here. Maybe you'd have some friends. Maybe you'd have a girlfriend. Maybe maybe you'd have somebody more here. But all you've got is me. And I'm only here because I promised Mom. And it was at that point he stopped. He wasn't completely without any self-knowledge. He was without a lot of but he wasn't without any self-knowledge. And it stopped him in his tracks. And he said, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. So it allowed me to stop re-traumatizing myself, because it gave me boundaries that I had never had before, because I didn't have beautiful Karen Robinson in my life at this time to teach me about boundaries, or Katerina Rando to teach me about boundaries. This helped me make boundaries for myself, because the person who was caring for him was a little girl who just desperately wanted to be loved and accepted. But the person who created the boundaries was the adult woman that knew that I had made a choice and I had made a commitment to do this, and that's why I was doing this. It didn't mean that I had to suffer everything because of it.
Thank you, my love. And I just want to say to survivors who don't want to take care of your abuser, that is also okay.
Oh, yes, you don't owe anybody anything.
It is okay. Carolyn, I want to thank you for your inspiring presentation today. Tammy, thank you for that comment too. If you have questions for Carolyn, I'm not sure how long she can stay, but put them in the chat.